Yeah, and we do not recycle on disposal the gains on fair value through OCI investments. Yeah, so we do not recycle because that is the rule. That is the rule, and that is consistent with PPE, but is inconsistent with the way that we deal with group exchange differences, for example. Impairment of financial assets. Impairment of financial assets. Okay, I'm going to say something which I shouldn't really say, and that is the phrase provision for bad debts. Okay? So for the next 15 minutes, really what I'm talking about is provision for bad debts. Somebody owes us some money, but they haven't yet gone bankrupt. They haven't yet gone bust. They're not yet a bad debt. And intuitively, you and I know that what we think about doing is making a provision for bad debts. Okay? But that language is not the language of the standard, and it's a little bit more complicated than just making a provision for bad debts. But that's the background thing that I'm thinking of. So, we are a bank, we have lent lots of money out, we are an investor, and we own some financial assets which are bonds. We've lent people money. Now, in the past, you would only do an impairment. In the past, you would only do a write-down. In the past, you would only make a... if there had been an actual default, if there had been a past event, if they were in breach of their covenants, if they had actually not paid you the money. And therefore, you would take something that had already happened. This would be on an incurred loss basis. So you would be on solid ground, and you would know that there is a breach of contract, and therefore you would then trigger the recognition of the loss. So the previous treatment was called an incurred loss basis. The previous treatment was called an incurred loss basis. And it depended upon there being a past event. For example, there being a default. Something had to physically happen. The advantage of dealing with the past is that it's certain. The advantage of dealing with the past is that it's certain. But it overstated assets and it overstated profits. But it overstated assets and it overstated profits. And that's a major problem when you are trying to be prudent. And this was arguably one of the contributory factors to the credit crunch. Because, yeah, the banks had lent money out, but because no one had defaulted, everything was fine. No bad debts, everything was fine. No provisions, everything was fine. And then suddenly, when it went wrong, everything went wrong, so it fell off a cliff. What they might have been able to do, perhaps what they should have done, is to be a bit more prudent and actually start to recognize in anticipation some of the losses that hadn't yet actually been incurred. So when the losses did arise, we've already effectively accounted for them. So a new approach has been adopted, And the new approach is the expected credit loss approach. So the new treatment, the one that we'll be talking about now, the new treatment is dealing with expected credit loss basis. Now here, you don't, in the past, you'd only be able to make a write-down if there had physically been a problem, something that you could point to. Now, you can consider future information. So under the expected credit loss, you can consider, of course you can consider the past, of course you can consider the present, but you can also consider future events. Things which haven't yet happened. Oh, I think interest rates might go up next year. If interest rates went up next year, that might cause one of my customers difficulty. I better make a provision for bad debts now, even though interest rates haven't yet gone up. Yeah, the price of oil is probably going to go up next year. Oh, that might cause somebody difficulty if they're buying, so whatever. So you can consider past, present, and future events. As soon as you start dealing with the future events, this is going to be subjective. This is going to be subjective. But there will be an anticipation. There will be an anticipation of losses, and there will be an anticipation of write-offs. So we will have lower profits and we will have lower assets as a result, because under the expected credit loss basis, we are anticipating losses, anticipating write-offs. Application. Impairment of financial assets. It does not apply to fair value financial assets. Yeah? So, but anticipation. Anticipation of losses. So we're going to anticipate losses.
Losses and written off.
Yeah, so if I lend you money, you have not yet broken any contract with me. But I think that interest rates might go up, and therefore I think, if interest might go up, if they did go up, you might then be in difficulty paying me back the money, therefore I'll make a provision for bad debt. Now, under the old system, you would simply not be allowed to do that. Because under the old system, you would only have to wait until there had been an actual default, or an actual breach of covenant, an actual breach of contract, some physical past event where you had physically shown distress. But if I pick up a trend, if I pick up something that I think is reasonable, then I will make a write-off. I will anticipate the write-off. I will anticipate the losses. I'll bring those losses forward. Now, the application for impairment is not universal. So the application here, we're looking at financial assets at amortized cost. That's the main one. Financial assets at amortized cost. That is the main one. We would also be looking at your financial assets, which are the debt instruments at fair value through OCI. So your financial assets which are fair value through OCI, but only if they're debt instruments. You'd be looking at things like lease receivables. So if you're a lessor, then your lease receivables, and generally receivables coming in from IFRS 15. So lease receivables coming in from ISA 17. So your debtors, basically debtors, people who owe you money. This is a fancy way of saying debtors, receivables. Who owes you money? Amortized cost. If you meet the cash flow test, they owe you money. If you're a lessor with a finance lease, they owe you money. You've got debtors, they owe you money. Now, your expected credit losses is the weighted average of credit losses that you expect. So you've got to look at the weighted average loss that you think you might incur. So there might be I don't know, let me just write it. So expected credit losses, are the weighted average of credit losses with the risks of default as the weights, with the risks of default as the weights. Now, what the standard calls for is 12 months. Every asset, as soon as you have a financial asset, amortized cost, you're supposed to do a judgment and anticipation of the losses that you think might happen in the next 12 months. So you make a provision for bad debts for 12 months. If you think the credit risk has materially increased, so if they're beginning to default, if their bond prices are falling, if they get into financial difficulty, if the credit risk materially rises, then you should be looking at making expected credit losses, impairment losses for a lifetime. So basically, everyone has to do a 12-month provision for bad debts, but if you think there's a great risk, you should do a lifetime. Equally, you should do a lifetime in the event that you're looking at something which is a credit impaired asset. So if you've bought a junk bond, if you've bought an asset that you know is in real risk of default because you're taking a gamble, you're buying it cheaply, then you should make a lifetime of expected credit losses. So the accounting is as follows. 12 months on initial recognition, 12 months on initial recognition, lifetime if there is a significant increase in the credit risk, lifetime if there is a significant increase in the credit risk, and lifetime if it is a credit impaired asset. Lifetime if it is a credit impaired asset. Cash. Lifetime, a lifetime if it is a credit impaired asset. Cash. The question is called cash. And the question of cash is on page 155.